Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the November Residency Liaison meeting. We will be recording this meeting, and we also will provide a link to the recording and the slide deck as soon as we can get it all processed, and we'll get that sent out to everybody a couple of days after the presentation. So thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it, and we have a few updates for you, not a whole lot this time. But we do have a few questions. As you know, we always start with the questions. And as a reminder about that, please help us keep this presentation of value to you by providing questions whenever we send out the request for either questions or agenda items, if you have any, because we want to make sure we're meeting your needs as a part of this meeting. So the very first question that we received has to do with people who have multiple RCNs and how to reconcile that. And basically what the RDS team would like us to do is to email them or give them a call and say, hey, I've got one person who has two separate RCNs, and then they will help us rectify that situation and let us know which RCN that we need to use. Is there anything that you want to add to that, Jean or Tracy?
Yeah, you could correct that typo for me.
Uh-oh.
It says it's supposed to say review, correct and respond. I probably did that. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. We can fix that. Yes. And they will review, not revise, whatever that means. Thank you, Tracy. Jean, anything?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that one of the questions was sometimes, they've been told to take the most recent and other times not. And that's why RDS wants to review it because it's not possible for a student to create a second RCN unless they change their social and other information. They get an error message saying, it looks like you have an account already. Please contact us if you need help doing that. So, we want to make sure that the record that has the correct information is going to pull into a colleague for you and not have the student have to come back again. So once that's determined, RDS will tell you which to use and they'll close out the other RCN. But we've done a whole lot to try to prevent this. If they use the same name, date of birth, social, login, email address, they get an error message saying it looks like you have an account and they have to overwrite it by putting in different information. Sometimes they made a mistake the first time and rather than correcting it, they come back and create another record. Other times they didn't like the decision and they figure if they change their information, it might produce a different result. But RDS will help, figure out which is the one that's going to pull into your system.
Excellent. Thanks, Jean and Tracy, for that clarification. And so we'll go ahead and move to the next question. And we've talked about this several times, and so I'm glad that we're talking about it again, just to make sure that there's clarity for everyone. And that is, when is the college expected to maintain documentation, especially for military and their dependents? And you can see there the answer from Jean and Tracy. Jean, would you like to expound on that a little bit?
I think just in general, when RDS makes a determination, there's not a need unless we tell you there's a need for tracking, like there is with a visa, because it's time limited for the visa. In this case, there's a provision that even if the service member gets transferred out of state, the student can keep that out-in determination as long as they're continuously enrolled. So there's a provision for that. So if you look at the new campus responsibility guide, I really expanded this section because we keep getting a lot of questions about documentation. In general, when you make a campus exception, it doesn't change the RDS residency. You need to document why you're making the exception. Then you would collect the document. It's a little different for veterans because it doesn't change their status automatically. They have to have a benefit. So that's why that one's a little different. But if you look at the residency guide, just in general, if RDS makes the determination, we've got the documentation on file. It's when you make an exception or their visa expired and you want to go ahead and extend them if they're already enrolled, then you would collect documentation.
And so this is one of those where I'd like to pause just a second because we have received so many questions on this one topic, just to make sure there's no clarifying questions from our participants. So feel free to put any clarification questions in the chat or unmute your microphone and let us know what your clarifying question is. Let's see, is that a question from Scott at Cape Fear? Okay, I'm gonna mute Scott. Are there any clarifying questions? Either unmute or throw those in the chat box.
JW, this is Joyce. I'm the one that submitted it this time because I had a conversation with Jean. I have had a few students who, before they've actually registered, have admitted to me that their spouse is no longer in the military, or a situation just today, or I've been working on for a little while, they're separated. They haven't been living together. And that's one of the requirements for this, is that they're living together. She said that she filled it out based on her husband because that's the way the interview required her to do it. Luckily, in this case, today she contacted me and said that the appeal came through and she's in. But should we just automatically run a report on these students and make them in-state tuition, apply the tuition benefits? I mean, as like on a daily basis, because I get a lot of them.
To me, Joyce, I would handle it like you would any other student. Put the military issue aside, that a student gets in, they have a determination, they enroll, and then they tell you, oh, well, I used to be, but my family has moved now. So once they disclose a change, I think then probably the best thing is to have them go back to RDS. But if they don't disclose it, I think we've discussed several times, I don't see a need for a campus to go out of their way to try to investigate each one to see if it's still valid. So I'm not sure I see this different from a non-military family. Something has changed on the way they answered the questions, and they've disclosed that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think my problem with it is because it's not automatically giving them in-state tuition, and we have to apply a student type. So basically what I probably should be doing is running a report on them, and anybody that gets the OI, apply the appropriate type, whether it be spouse or military, and then rebill them all that are currently registered, right?
I'll let JW weigh it because this gets to, I guess, a campus issue. But to my mind, I would treat it the same way as you would a non-military. If they told you, if the information came in, they were in state, and they validated with RDS based on the information provided, something changed in the meantime, I don't think you need to go out of your way to look for that and police that. But if you become aware and they tell you this no longer applies, I would send them to RDS. JW, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the guidance is that if the authority of RDS, and they're the governing body, that we follow that guidance. Now, how we operationalize that is what you're getting to, Joyce, is a little different. And I don't know, I'd have to think about that a little bit. Is whether you run a report and everybody who's OI, and then you just automatically give the, I guess they would have OI and they would have the military category codes, right? I don't see that any difference than manually looking at it. I'm kind of thinking off the top of my head here. I mean, what do you think, Joyce, or others?
Right now, what we do is we have them fill out a form and attach the military documents and the proof that they're dependent and living with the military personnel. So I'm thinking, based on this conversation, I don't need to have them fill that out, and I can go ahead and process, and then if we find out afterwards, we can handle it. Is that the way?
That's the way I'm hearing it as well.
Okay.
And Gene's shaking his head yes too. So in other words, we can trust the decision from RDS and take action based upon that information they provided to us. And then just like any other student, if we locally become aware of something that makes it appear to be inaccurate, then we send them back to RDS for the decision to be made.
For RDS to give that determination about in, the student had to have presented orders in writing and evidence that they qualify. Now, if they told you now they no longer qualify, again, that's to me the same as like an in-state student saying my family's moved, we're not here anymore. Can I take distance learning or something? But RDS doesn't just grant this based on them saying that. There's an actual uploading of an actual order, and they have to show that this is an eligible member and attest that they're eligible. So, I mean, based on that, to me, I would take that at face value. We're trying to trust that unless, like in this case, they told you it no longer applies. And in some cases, like you're citing here, the student might qualify on their own merit if they married a service member, but they're already a North Carolina resident, or they've done that, or they can be separated. It's based on marriage in some cases. So there's a lot of variables there, but RDS will sort that out if you send them back.
Thank you.
Sure.
So this is Michelle from Coastal. It is the responsibility of the student to disclose that they've made a change. Most students are not going to disclose those changes. So we rely only on what RDS said, and we do not worry about any documentation. I'm just trying to clarify that that's what you're indicating.
Yeah, I think that's what we've said in all these cases, unless you have evidence to the contrary. So if the student comes in and says, I need to change my permanent address because we live in Virginia now and I'm just going to take distance learning courses, well, you have evidence to the contrary that it might need review and see if they're eligible for a grace period or something. But I think we've said several times that I don't think, and I guess JW, this gets back to policy issue at your end, I don't think there's the need to spend hours investigating each one of these to see, is it really true? I mean, if we've collected the documents and they have attested it's true, unless you become aware of a change, I don't think you need to be getting into all of that.
But the documentation specifically says that the campus is responsible for tracking a member's continued eligibility for the exception at regular intervals based on assignment, reassignment, retirement, or honorable discharge.
Yes. So, however, that reassignment, if you become aware of it, okay, the biggest trigger in this case, it's different from the veterans because that's got to be reviewed every term because it hinges on a financial aid award and that's governed by federal law. But here is, if they stay continuously enrolled and you have no evidence to the contrary, I think we've said, you would go with that. So I think what most campuses are doing is looking to see if the student stopped out, comes back 2 years later, they would need to be reevaluated. JW, thoughts? I know we keep coming back to this issue.
Well, I'm having two thoughts after I think that was Michelle, her comments, is I'm wondering if we need to revisit the wording in the campus guide because it does put the onus of responsibility on the campus. And so I think that's what's making colleges feel like that they're responsible to make sure that something hasn't changed. Whereas,
Okay.
but what we're saying is that RDS has checked it and there's no need to confirm it on a regular basis. But the guide says something different.
Yeah, I'll be happy to take a look at it. I mean, there is a provision if the person truly retires, and then there's all kinds of triggers, they'd have to be reevaluated. But if they're simply transferred, let me take a look at it. But even if they're transferred, as I say, there's a provision, they can keep that out in as long as they're continuously enrolled. So I think the biggest issue is stop outs or people who graduate and then later come back to take more courses. That could be an issue. But yes,
Right.
I'll take a look at that.
Yeah, and so let's just take a look at that wording and maybe we could clarify it. And Michelle, I want your feedback on this, is maybe we could clarify something along the lines of the campus is responsible on a regular basis to confirm continuous enrollment, since that's the information we have, whereas the responsibility of RDS is the other piece, right? You've confirmed that they met all eligibility requirements except for continuous enrollment in a program of study.
Yes, and then I would like to identify or define continuous enrollment and program, because that came up, I think, last time too,
Okay.
with what the true definition of continuous enrollment. We allow students to graduate and register for another program without having to do a new application.
Right. So let Jean and I and maybe some others go back and look at the campus guide. Now I'm seeing a little more clearly now why there's confusion, and that makes sense to me. And we'll revisit that and try to have some better answers for you at our next meeting. Would that be helpful, Joyce and Michelle, especially since you guys were the ones bringing this up?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So we do have two questions here in the chat from Jamie at CCCC. They have students who have PCS'd out of state before they started attending with us. So is that between application and registering? Is that what you're talking about, Jamie?
No, JD, that's between getting their RCN and out in status and then actually registering and attending school. It could be, they did their RDS, 10 months ago and then are coming for spring, but meanwhile, they're already in Texas. And a lot of times they don't necessarily do a change of address because the mail is still going to mom's house. So like Joyce, we have a form that must be updated annually, which is where I will catch them. And Jean knows we had one that claimed to RDS she was a mother and she was actually the sister taking care of children. And so did not qualify for the military dependent waiver. And being close to a military base, I'm sure Joyce and Michelle know this also, there seems to be a lot of transition with the family unit, not just in moving, but in who's married to whom. So, the caveat of being enrolled in the same program is problematic, especially for a lot of these students who want to do nursing because they may be pre-nursing for 2 or 3 semesters. And technically that is a different program. And with the wording now, the onus is on the college. I mean, we all feel responsible. So I know you guys feel like we're a broken record asking these questions, but we have been, we rated and said, this is our responsibility.
Right, and I appreciate you being a broken record because I think I'm starting to understand a little better the wording that's in the campus guide and how that makes you feel more responsible. And so we'll definitely take a look at that to see if we can tighten that wording up to make it more clearly define what the roles are between RDS and the college, especially when it comes to the military like this. But Jean, I would like to hear your thoughts on the first comment, and that is somebody who receives the OI with the active duty or the military dependent, but they actually don't register and they end up moving or even PCSing prior to registration.
Yeah. Well, again, I go back to the same thing, JW, is if they gave us evidence, if they give RDS evidence that we have it in writing, that they qualified, we don't know if they're going to register tomorrow or 18 months from now. Something could change. And so I think, again, like a non-military family, I think, I would say take that at face value unless you have evidence to the contrary. Once you do, you can always send them back to RDS for another reevaluation. And then we would look at what's the current situation. It's less likely, I guess, if they do a RDS request and then quickly enroll, but yeah, they submit one in October when they're a senior in high school and enroll the following fall, something could have changed. So, again, I mean, I don't know if you really want to get into checking every single student that's coming in the fall. But I would take it at face value unless you become aware of something to the contrary. And then you can always send it back to RDS to have a current snapshot taken.
Do we need to notify RDS of why we're sending them back?
It would probably be helpful, but there's not a requirement. One of the options a student has under reconsideration is to check why they're coming back is the campus asked me. But if you let the folks there and the team and the campus line know, or an email, that would certainly be helpful, that we could take a closer look and see what the story is. And
So
the other
thank
thing to
you.
consider is, like, for example, if there is one parent that truly has ties here and has been a North Carolina resident, even though they've married someone, let's say in the service, who is not, I mean, there still may be a claim to get an in-state, residency. RDS can reevaluate that once we're aware of what the situation is or what the change was.
So thank you to everybody that's been bringing this back up, because it's become very apparent we need to look at this more closely. And I apologize for being a little dense and not really understanding where the confusion was lying. And I feel like I understand a little better now, and we should be able to hopefully get something rectified in the next couple of months. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for your persistence. I appreciate both of those. So I'm going to pause one more time just because this is such an important topic. Is there any other questions or comments before we move forward? Okay, so not hearing any. I'd like to introduce you guys to Jesse. I'm probably going to mispronounce your last name. I apologize.
NATO.
NATO. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. So Jesse's at South Piedmont, right?
Yes.
And sent out a survey and got some really good responses back. And so I'd asked Jessie if she'd like to share what those responses are, just because I thought it might be helpful for the whole group. So I'll be quiet, and I'll push the slides through based on what you need me to do. Okay, you got the mic, Jessie.
Okay, I'll do my best. So we recently had two incidences where basically we weren't notified of changes that happened. The first was a student, I guess he had applied initially, he was in state. I don't know if he failed to provide documentation or whatever. He went to out, and I only caught that because he came into the office, and I think I checked Cross Connect for his expiration date or something and noticed that he was out there. So, and then that brought up the issue of, I think that went back to the spring term, like how do we handle like rebilling? And then the opposite happened. We had a student who was, I guess she was initially out. I think she just didn't provide all the information and was being charged out, but she had gone back and done the reconsideration, and her family was paying out of pocket these out of state rates, but they didn't notify us of the change, and they didn't notify us till the fall. So that brought up the question of, do we go back and rebill for the previous semester? So it was really two things. How does everyone kind of handle those situations? And then how do we avoid this happening, catching these things in real time and not semesters later? So and then I'll just kind of read through the responses. We got a lot of great responses. Guilford Tech, they're very strict on notification. Since the students are instructed to notify the campus of changes, they only rebill for the specific term until the last day of classes. If the notification comes after that, they will not rebill unless the student can prove that they notified and it was the college's error. The college didn't take action. Beaufort Community College, they created a save list of all active students and then use that to pull in the residency updates for everyone before the semester begins. Durham Tech, when they have that issue, their business office will rebill those students, rebill those prior terms within the effective date. They suggest also a saved list of the out-of-state students, running that through XRDO periodically to catch any changes. Wake technical. Okay, the main thing that helped us with the situation was having IT staff create a process for admissions staff that process applications. So when the admissions staff moves an applicant to student, it automatically runs through XRDO. They found several years ago that students would apply, and by the time they registered, their status would change. Prior to that, the student status would remain how it came in on the application unless the student notified them. And we all know that students aren't always paying attention to any changes that happen after they apply. When they realized it was an issue, they had many students were being billed out of state rate, but were charged in state. They used the late verified out of state student type for the period so that they're not, they didn't have to be rebilled since the college didn't know they were supposed to be monitoring that. Davidson Davy, they work with their advisor. So if an advisor sees that the student is out of state or that their RDS is expiring, then they will have a conversation with the students to make sure that's up to date. They have an admission specialist who works closely with the advising team to update residency information, and they have a residency email account that students are instructed to reach out to make sure their information is up to date. As far as admissions, checking residency is included in their pre and post admissions checklist on their website. A digital letter students receive and a physical letter that's mailed to them. I guess they said the important thing is the handoff between admissions and advising and checking that to eliminate the potential for incorrect billing.
Well, Jesse, thank you for going through those for us and kind of summarizing them. I appreciate it. Does anybody do anything a little bit different than what we heard from these colleges?
This is Joyce. I don't remember getting the survey, but our liaison has left the college, and I think I'm officially the coordinator. But anyway, of course, our advisors watch it, our financial aid office watches it, but I also run a report looking for all the out-of-state students a couple times a semester and just run those through XRDO. You have to break the report up a little so it doesn't get stuck, but it does go through, and we get a handful of students that change that weren't caught because the student didn't notify us, but at least we can catch them hopefully before the semester ends, and preferably before the semester really gets started.
So I have a question in regards to that. So if you are taking on that responsibility and doing that, is the responsibility still on the student to notify as well? Do you still approach it that way, or is that something the college assumes responsibility for?
If they come back a semester or two later, it's the student's responsibility. They should have notified us during that term, but we try to help the students out because we do have a large number of students.
This is Blue Ridge. We also don't recall getting that survey, and we're a little similar but a little different. So we run our process pretty wide open. We'll run XRCE a couple times a semester as well. And then we also see that come through XRDO when we get those that go from in to out, but we of course never get anything that says they go from out to in. So the process that we've been doing since 2017 is relying on the students. We communicate that fairly heavily, that if they do get a new determination going from out to in, to please contact our office, that they'll receive an email. It will look sort of like this, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have not had very many situations where students get rebilled after the fact because we do communicate pretty clearly that you have honor before the last day of semester to be rebilled. The 2 times that it has happened, we did go ahead and rebill because the dates were there in XRDS, so there wasn't a lot of argument there. And thankfully, we've not had it happen enough that we've had to put our foot down, because the 2 that it did happen with were not very happy people, so we made that happen. But that's how we handle it.
Thank you, Sarah. Anyone else?
Can I ask one more question?
Of
While I have
course.
everyone's attention. So we do daily run XRDO and we do yes for the unvalidated in state and yes for the RCN without expiration. And then we do the XRDIR. What exactly is that pulling in? Is that only pulling in the ones that have not validated yet? What exactly am I looking at on that report? I guess.
Yeah, that's what you're looking at. It's pulling everyone who hasn't validated to this point, and it pulls for us, it pulls the people that go from in to out. And it also pulls the people that cannot validate because they may have a mismatch in data. So you can use that report to go and look if it's their date of birth, social, or the NCY's ID in XMCA. So for us, we use it for those three things.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So one reason why I wanted Jesse to share with us today is I kind of feel like we've made a turn since we've been doing RDS now for quite some time. Is a lot of the questions or agenda item requests that I send out is not really problem solving as much. I mean, we do have a few every once in a while, but I'm wondering if we need to use that process as well to survey colleges on how are you doing fill in the blank, right? How are you handling fill in the blank? So it's becoming a best practices conversation or common practice conversation as well. So in the future, when you get that agenda item request, kind of think in those terms as well, right? Because just like we heard today, is there are occasions where we're busy and we don't see the survey and we don't see the email or something, and so maybe we miss it. So if you jot down that question that you have, and then when I send out the request for agenda items, you could submit that as a question, and we'll make that part of our conversation in the next liaison meeting. So I think that might be a way that we at the system office can help serve you guys on hearing how other colleges are handling things. Do have a couple of comments here in the chat, just in case there's people on the phone. Let's see, let me get caught up here. Does anyone else run XDRO every day? This is from Cape Fear. I run with Y for unvalidated and N for RCM without expiration. And then you can see here, Blue Ridge runs it every day with a YY. Central Piedmont runs it YY at least once a day, during peak times more often. Let's see, Nicola runs it unvalidated in-state Y and RCM without expiration Y. Let's see. So most are doing YY versus YN. I think that's what we're seeing in the chat, Scott. And then Sarah at Blue Ridge says that they run XRCE at the end of the semester. Wayne does every day YY. Nash runs every day YY. Thanks for giving me time to read through these because we're recording, and that way we have the answers recorded as well as for people that might be on the telephone. So, okay, I'm going to pause one more time for any other additional comments on this topic.
Did have a quick comment that just to let you know that if they read it, the student is informed whenever they come to RDS that if there's a change, it's their responsibility to notify the campus, because we don't know what campus and when they're enrolling or applying to and all of that. And anytime they have a change or an appeal, they get an email following up saying there's been a change, you need to let the campus know. A lot of campuses do send out, including the UNC system, kind of like reminders if it looks like they live in North Carolina, but they're having out-of-state determinations saying, hey, be aware of this, here's a deadline. And finally, I don't know, this is before your time, JW, there at the system office, because way back under system design, the community colleges and colleagues do this a little differently than the UNCs do in their systems. It sounds like a lot of people are having to run these reports regularly to pull in changes. The UNC system, it's automated so that if a student has a change, their system runs a process to automatically update it overnight. I don't remember why. I think it was in colleague development. They had a problem with doing that. I don't know if that could be revisited, but maybe there's a way to automate that so that it's automatically updating. I mean, RDS can't push it to you because we don't know where they're attending, but it's out there on the server. So I didn't realize this many people were running regular reports to try to find new determinations.
Right. Well, it's because it's more difficult for us than the UNCs in that we have rolling admissions. So we're registering and enrolling people at a
Right.
minimum every weeks.
Yeah, I get
often
that,
more
but
often than that. So
but they still run a process of it's what your folks are doing, running these processes manually. They automate every night to
yeah, I
catch
get
people who already admitted who've had a change.
right. Yeah, and I was a part of that conversation at the very beginning, and I can't remember why our IT department said that it was not feasible, but we could definitely bring it up and see if it's feasible today, even though it wasn't feasible then.
Right.
So
Jane.
Sarah, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, so I have a question for Jean. I understand that it's difficult for residency to sit there and say, okay, well, something has gone to in-state, but we don't know what college, but it seems counterintuitive if we're able to get that through XRDO when they go from in-state to out-of-state. It seems like we could get the out-of-state to in-state as well, because if we're trying to reduce barriers for students, it just is creating more onus on the student when they're already doing a very complicated process to have to notify us as well when we can get it when it goes from in to out-of-state. Do you think there's anything in the plan to try to include that as well?
Well, again, it's the information's pushed to the server. The way the system works is it's the college that reaches out and pulls it. It doesn't push directly to a college. And in some cases, they may apply to 4 different institutions, and we don't know where they're going to end up or where they did. So it would probably be best if it's possible to automate it from the campus side. What you're doing manually, is there a way to run a script or through your IT to manually do that?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Jean, the way it's worded in the email to the students, does it use the word campus or does it say school? Because that's a little confusing to students, particularly if they're at a larger school that has several campuses or working with several schools.
Tracy, unless you happen to know, we'll review the language.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know offhand.
I could look it up. You don't want to take the time now to make you wait, but yeah, we'll certainly look at that.
What's your preference, Joyce?
Well, I think campus is kind of confusing, that word. So school or institution might be a better option.
Okay. I like to avoid using the word school. It's just one of my pet peeves. Or colleges. So I kind of like
College
the
is
word
fine
college.
too.
Maybe
Yeah.
college/university.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, school was, I know some people were worried about putting school. They thought that means if they're in high school to let your high school know.
Exactly. So I think college distinguishes us from K through 12. All right. Great conversation, everybody. I hate to stop it. Any other thoughts before we move forward? All right, then, Tracy, I think you're up.
Hey, I sent you the stats. Oh yeah, I see them. The version, does your version have the number of call center calls on the bottom? No.
No, it didn't.
It's cut off. I realized that after I sent it out to some people. So I'll send you another version.
Okay.
But it looks like overall we just continue the trend of a little bit of a decrease. This decrease of 1.22% is like a little bit less of a decrease than in the past. So I don't know if it's picking back up a little bit or just kind of leveling out as to how many people do RDS in a given quarter. Everything else is, I'm not going to go through each line because it's pretty much the same type of thing as every month. The number of calls continues to be reduced, which we're happy about. I will have soon, I will have some college application week statistics. I'm having a little bit of trouble with, we're getting some of the numbers together now. And there's a few things that we want to change about the report, so we're still working on it. But college application week went well. We had more applications this year than we had last year, so that's good. It was a success. Nothing went wrong. We were always happy about that. We also, the other thing I have is that we'll be doing the continuous enrollment process. We'll be requesting our file from the clearinghouse on December 9th. And then as soon as they send it back, we'll run that process to extend expiration dates for students that are enrolled in North Carolina. And then I guess you guys probably saw my email yesterday afternoon about our website. We're gonna give the RDS website a new look and feel, and it's gonna be on a platform that we're happy about because it'll enable us to make content changes. The business will be able to make content changes, whereas on the current website, if I want to make a content change, we have to enter a request of programming. And so this will make us be able to make faster content changes. And if you wanted to, I was going to show you just what the new website looks like. It's coming out tomorrow, but if you want a sneak preview, I can show it to you. I mean, it's coming out tonight.
Yes, let's see if we have time once we get to the end, and then
Yeah,
maybe we can revisit that, Tracy.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I did want to mention one thing. We do encourage colleges to still run your continuous enrollment processes locally, just because then that captures your any of the exceptions that you may have put into place. And then the updated expiration dates that RDS does will come to us if you ever need to download from RDS again. So I think that's very helpful. Tracy, I did have one question for you though on the stats, and I know you'll just be guessing to this, but I did want to point it out, is if we look on the percent of residents, I mean, there is I guess it's interesting that the percent of residence determinations went down by 2%. You know, almost 2 1/3. Do we have an understanding of why there's more people being classified, less people being classified as residents?
My guess would be that residents in the past, if they moved to another college or 15 months passed, they would have to come and do RDS again. So there's no reason. See, a lot of those could have been people that were a resident and then they just did RDS again because they went to summer school and then they did RDS again. You know what I'm saying? But now they don't have to do that anymore. It's not required. It doesn't expire and they don't have to, if they go from college to college or they take summer school at a different college, they don't have to redo it again.
Because of your continuous enrollment process.
Correct.
Okay.
So there's no reason for somebody that's a resident to do RDS more than one time unless they break their continuous enrollment in the whole state, you know?
Right.
So I know that's at least part of it, and that would make sense that most of the people, you know, a lot of the people that are coming in to do RDS, they've never done it. Now they've never done it before.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what my guess is.
I was wondering if some of that might be also that the graduate schools are now involved.
Good.
And so there's more graduate students trying to get in-state residence. Gene or Tracy, do you think that might be the case?
I not just graduate, but undergrad. UNC is definitely seeing an increase in out-of-state applications. In fact, they've talked about that recently, and they're proposing to raise the out-of-state tuition. So yeah, they definitely have more out-of-state applicants. So that probably accounts for a bunch of them, especially in graduate school. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. And then the last thing I kind of wanted to point out to everybody, I mean, you see here at the age 50 and older, we're definitely seeing a growth spike there. Now, remember, this is all sectors of education, higher education, but we're seeing a growth area there in the adult students and doing more RDS. So that means there's more applicants, right? I always put this slide in, and this is just a reminder that RDS has always been really good about being there for us, and using that campus support number is a great way to find out what's going on with a specific student. There's nothing wrong at all that if you have a student that it's there and is having difficulty, to pick up the phone and give RDS a call and help that student get it worked out so they know what their next steps are. Gene, what do you have for us?
Okay, very quickly, just I think everyone's aware the new campus responsibility guide came out in July. It is still current, and then the RDS guidebook was last January. In terms of responsibility guide, I'm really trying to keep building in more detail based on a lot of the questions I get on a regular basis. So I'm hoping it's a helpful document, a reference document. I put in codes, I put in contact information, more information about the limited number you have to track and which types you need to track. So if you have any feedback or other things that would be helpful to include in it, let me know for future reference. Right now, there are no changes to be made. Already I've had a couple calls because every legislative session, there's a lot of bills that are filed. The last legislative session, the short session, there was, once again, this happens every year, 2 years, a bill filed to give a tuition exception to like DACA students or people who didn't have a status but are applying for asylum. And again, it did not move forward. So we monitor those very closely. Right now, there was nothing else pending. So everything you have is current. Just one more reminder about students from Afghanistan or Ukraine, or I had one call about what about recent arrivals that have been the media from like Venezuela. Most of these people have been given what's called a humanitarian parole, and they are lawfully present, but they have no legal status. It's to give them the opportunity to apply and see if they qualify for one. So for our purposes, it would not meet criteria for residency or an exception. Now, folks from Afghanistan, Ukraine, unfortunately, people keep talking about it, everyone a generic sense of refugees. In the government's definition, they are not, but they've been approved to apply for a temporary protected status. So that's a shortcut compared to other tracks. So if they apply and hold it for that 12 months, they will be eligible. Okay, so I know immigration gets very complicated. A lot of you contact me when you have these. I'm happy to, look through individual cases with you, and we'll do our best. We had the training before. We'll renew that again, or we'll look at that again with UJW and Monty and see if there's a need for another in the spring because of a lot of new folks. If there is, or if you need something individually, a couple of campuses have reached out about, can you help us understand immigration issues? We have a lot of students, or help our VA folks understand how to process this. Happy to do something one-on-one if you need it. And that's it for me.
Right, excellent. Thank you, Gene. The only thing that I would add to that last comment is Monty and I have been working with a group and with our general counsel to talk about immigration and admissions, because immigration and admissions is a different decision than immigration and residency status. And so we've been working over the past few months to try to get that a little better guidance and a little better documentation for admissions officers. So that way they kind of understand a little better about what immigration means from an admissions perspective. So we're working on that. It's moving maybe at a snail's pace, but we are working on it. So we come to the time now. There's I don't have any updates for you guys today, but we do want to open things up to see if you have any questions. And if not, then I'll stop sharing and I'll give an opportunity for Tracy to share the webpage if you'd like. Tracy, are you able to share your screen and share the webpage?
Yeah, it won't take but a second because I'm not going to go through the whole site. I'm just going to show you the home page. Can you see it?
Yes.
There it is. As you can see, it just sort of has a refreshed look. We added, this is all the same. We added two, we updated these two because these are the areas where people have the most trouble with the actual interview itself, as you know, for technical reasons, logging in and navigating RDS. In this one, the most common issues, the first one, students trying to go through without their parents. So we have a section on that. We think that's going to help if the students look at it. And these, and your campus school admin is down here as before. Same login. I just wanted to just give you a little quick look at it, and to let everybody know that there's no change to the interview. There's no technical changes to the interview. There's no changes to the content of the website except what I just showed you right now. So we don't expect any interruptions in service or any problems from this. But that's it.
All right, thank you, Tracy. I appreciate that. One last pause here, my friends, before we end the meeting. Any questions or comments before we end?
JW.
Yes.
The thing I was going to say is our CCR department has been sending their current students back through RDS because they're being eligible for grants. So that might be why the 50 or more is increasing. And also thank you, Jean, for doing the one-on-one with Central Piedmont. We appreciated it.
Outstanding. Thank you. Well, thank you, everybody, for the dialogue today. I really appreciate it. Thank you to Jesse for letting me put you on the spot in front of the whole state. And as always, Jean and Tracy, we appreciate you guys and your service to the colleges and to our students. And we really do appreciate your partnership. Thank you, everybody, for everything you do to serve your students. And we'll do our best to continue to serve you. You guys have a great afternoon now.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks.